The story of astronomy is fabulous. It, like all human systems, is replete with narcissism of thinking that we humans are the most important thing in the cosmos. The story of astronomy begins to escalate with Nikolai Copernicus, who said the old Ptolemy system happens to be inaccurate. He couched it, though, with a letter to the Pope so he didn't offend the Catholic Church. And then different people like Tycho Brahe and particularly Galileo really set the stage that the Earth was not the center of the cosmos, that in our particular section of the world, it was the sun. We are the sun system. We go around the sun. The sun doesn't go around us. A tremendous blow to narcissism. Astronomers since the days of Galileo and Copernicus and Tycho Brahe have advanced greatly, particularly in the 1920s, because in this session I want to talk about space, and eventually I'll get to the Milky Way Galaxy. In the 1920s, at the Palomar Telescope in California, Edwin Hubble, a former Rhodes Scholar, began to realize that there was more galaxies than just this Milky Way Galaxy. And as he turned his telescope further and further out with the 200-inch telescope, he began to discover that there were a multiple number of other galaxies. Those little fuzzy spots that previous astronomers had seen turned out to be a galaxy. Now, in our time here in the 21st century, we know that there are about 200 billion galaxies, each with over 100 billion stars in it. And they're scattered way out into space. And as I said in the last lecture, the Webb telescope will be able to identify things more particularly. But this is a tremendous blow to narcissism. I am great, I am super, I'm the central thing in the universe. God watches me, God knows who I am, and I am very, very important. Narcissism. All the old religions are replete with narcissism. Now, one person asked me, why did you include philosophy, Frank, when you said that the axial age religions and philosophies are dying out? The reason is reason. Because all the old philosophies, up until Freud, talked about the centrality of reason. They were not really conscious of the importance of emotion and that little flicker of emotion that corrupts thinking. And it usually is in the defense of narcissism, of how important I am. I know Immanuel Kant, and you only know Hegel. I know Aristotle, and you only know Plato. This is such nonsense. The new story that began with astronomy is telling us that each individual is not that important. What is important is all the individuals on the face of the earth. We're on one planet here. Now, it turns out that we are in the Milky Way Galaxy. And I'll show you a picture in the next session of the Milky Way Galaxy. It happens to have 200 billion stars. But as galaxies go, it's not particularly grand, so we can't say, my galaxy is better than your galaxy. There my old foe comes to the front once again, of narcissism, of thinking that your system is the best ever. Edwin Hubble was an arrogant man. He went to England on a Rhodes Scholar, and he was just sort of a country boy. He taught in a little school in Kentucky, but he decided when he was in England that he would become English, kind of a noble. And so even despite the stuff that I know in terms of psychology, Edwin Hubble made a tremendous contribution to humanity as we shrink narcissism. Well, the old stories of the axial age are dying. And of course, as I've said perhaps too many times, they are just stuffed through with narcissism. That my Hinduism is better than your Muslimism. My Muslim is better than your Christianity. My Judaism is better than your whatever. Zoroastrianism, for instance. Anything can be used for anything. That's the one philosophical principle that I really hold on to. And out of these old religions, there have been beauty, there's been love, there's been justice, there's been daily kindness, there's been consideration for others. But the old axial religions have also bolstered narcissism, as have national tales. All the national stories of the greatness of the history are really exaggerated beyond belief. We've got this land by taking it away from the Native Americans. We made our wealth by slavery in the South and other parts of the country. So the national stories are dying out also of how great the United States is compared to Britain, or how Britain is greater than the French, or how the French are better than the people in Guyana. Those are dying out stories. They're no longer significant. We live in a multicolored, cultured world. Now, of course, there are always new ideologies that come forth. Now, I'm a great believer in capitalism, but not absolute capitalism. If absolute capitalism wouldn't build roads, it wouldn't have built the internet, it wouldn't have set up laws in a country. We need government and we need capitalism to balance each other out. In my particular area, people who are absolute that capitalism has the every answer to everything in the world, which is raw narcissism once again. But in my area, the capitalists have taken over the school board, and they don't know anything about education. But what they're doing is they're killing public schools, both in Jefferson County and in Douglas County out here in Colorado. And the reason is, well, you don't want public schools because you want cheap labor. That's what I think is behind this whole move. But I want to say that all these old philosophies are dying out. Capitalism will last forever. It has made people around the world become consumers and want more, more, more. Let me give you one example of axial religion that is dying out. Buddhism. The Buddha said that all the world is suffering, and that we who live on it must understand that suffering is caused by us wanting things. And so if we stop our continual desire for more and more things, we will have less suffering. Well, capitalism is hitting Buddhist countries very strongly, whether or not it's Burma or Vietnam or some places in China or Japan, even in India. Capitalism is saying buy, buy, buy. The cost of having one of these is to get advertisements beating us on the head every time we do something, every time we look up information. Capitalism is telling us to buy, buy, buy. And so that's one thing that is destroying the philosophy of Buddha, who I think was a grand human being. Well, again, anything can be used for anything. But if we want to have perspective, if we want to get a news story, we need to realize that there are 200 billion galaxies. And the amazing thing about space that makes my head want to explode is that galaxies are sprinkled out. So the most amazing thing is that we see great, vast distances between galaxies, although some of them have collided, and some of them are still colliding. But part of that is that there's such immense space between the stars that they can go right by each other. It's incredible. But this is the great story. And it's a great story that will move us away from this destructive narcissism, this continual bent to use vengeance and to use greed and to control, and then think, I am so great because I have several $1 million or a couple of $1 billion, and my philosophy is only philosophy. This is bosh. This is ridiculous when you look at this immense cosmos. So I'm going to end here, and I will approach more of the Milky Way Galaxy in our next talk.